We went to
go to a funeral before.
My grandfather passed away in 2017, and we had to drive from DC to Kansas City to go and bury him. And I don't think that Deepali was prepared for the Black funeral experience. I don't think there's any way to really explain that to people, even though you said you'd seen it in movies and stuff before, but you didn't think that was real.
Yeah, I thought the movies were exaggerated. So when you watch a movie, you always think, oh, well, there's some truth to that, but that's probably exaggerated. Well, I thought it was exaggerated. So when I saw it in real life, I was like, oh, it really is like that.
Welcome to the Zami Nobla National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging podcast. We are your sound source for Black lesbian herstory. I'm your host, Angela Denise Davis. The moment we are pulled from the womb of our mother, we are trying to find space for ourselves in this world. That search for space becomes even more complicated when we find ourselves in committed relationships and discover that it's more than a notion to live, love, and learn with the partner you've committed to being in a long-term relationship with. Today, as we continue our conversation with lesbian couples, we speak with Deepali and Tishana, a couple who talk about their process of making space in each other's lives and the way in which their cultural differences have shaped their understanding of space and what that looks like for them as they move forward in their 8.5-year-long relationship.
My name is Deepali Gokhale, and I move in the world as mostly like an adventurous amateur and a really silly but responsible person.
My name is Tishana Trainor. I move in the world as a curious bystander. I like to observe people.
Deepali and Tishana, thank you so much for being part of our Zami Nobla podcast, especially as we are interviewing lesbian couples. Tell me a little bit more about yourselves. Where did you all spend your formative years?
I was born in India. I spent the first 2 years of my life mostly with my grandparents. My mom was there for a little bit, but both my parents moved to the U.S. while I was still a baby. So me and my older sister lived with our grandparents up till about the age of 2. And then they brought us here to the U.S. And then I grew up mostly in Northern Virginia. Went to school in that area all the way up till 11th grade. And then we moved to Egypt. I was only there my last year of high school. My older sister and I came back here for college, graduated from Virginia Tech, spent a couple years in D.C. again, and then moved to Atlanta in 1995. I guess it was 15. But I was in Dallas for a contract, and then I moved back here for a little bit, and then we moved to Washington, D.C. in 2016.
I was born in New York. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. My dad was in the military when I was a baby, so we moved around a lot. But the big 3 were Kansas City, Kansas, New York, and then Atlanta, Georgia. But we moved a lot back and forth between Kansas and New York until I was 14 when we finally moved to Georgia. Mm-hmm. And then I was in Georgia until we moved to Northern Virginia in 2016.
How did you all meet?
You want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
Go ahead.
I don't think that's fair. Okay, I met Deepali through a mutual friend, Melanie, at a dinner that, officially, because I've seen Deepali in community in Atlanta, but we met at a dinner at, what was the place? Real Chow Baby. And we were meeting Melanie's new partner. And we were just all at dinner, and I thought she was really cute, but I was really annoyed by her because she kept talking about her phone, her iPhone. Also, I was seeing someone, so it was like, oh, she's cute, but all she does is talk about her phone. Like it was annoying, but she was still cute. And then we kept seeing each other because we had other mutual friends. And then I thought I would kind of see what she was like a little bit, like try to get closer to her. But I didn't think that I was of her caliber. so to speak. She just seemed so together, and I was a single mother of 2 kids in college. I just felt like I didn't have my stuff together enough to talk to Deepali, but I just kept seeing her out. And then I was trying to ask her out, but we asked each other out at the same time. I'm going to let her tell her side of that story. But it kind of happened one summer. We went to the U.S. Social Forum in Detroit, and we were both going to be there, and she offered to pick me up from the airport. And then we had a dinner where she was like, if you pay for my dinner, people are going to think that we're dating. And I was like, oh my God, she just friend zoned me. And then we didn't really go to the social forum. We just kind of drove around Detroit, and it was really fun and cute. And then when we got back, I was like, I kind of want to see her. So that's my side of the story.
Okay, yeah, my side is similar. Yeah, so we met at Real Chow Baby. I thought she was cute, but we were both involved with other people, so it was a long, long courtship because we met, I think, 2 years before we actually started dating. Yeah, we really connected, and in Detroit at the social forum, unexpectedly, really, because, I had offered to pick her up at the airport, and then when she got there, my side of that story about how I said the wrong thing. Yeah, she was trying to pay for my dinner, and I said, well, people might think we're dating. Well, I thought I was being flirty. But it apparently didn't go over the right way. No. And so then I saw her face, and I was like, oh, I said the wrong thing. So I've always been very terrible at dating. So I'm better in relationships, but the dating thing I have never been able to figure out. So I had been talking about her to my friends who I was staying with, and we were, I was getting coaching from them about dating because, I knew that I wasn't so great. So they were telling me, oh yeah, you put yourself in the friend zone. So I was like, okay, well, maybe we can just be friends. And, I was a little disappointed, but I was like, okay, well, we'll just be friends. And so that was kind of my approach. We hung out. We got to spend a lot of time just hanging out in Detroit because we totally played hooky from the social forum.
We really did.
We literally just drove around the city looking at things and having some fun. As soon as we got back, wasn't that when we
were supposed to go to Jeju?
Tried to go to Jeju. Yeah, so we were going to go to Jeju, and my friends had to convince me that it was okay. Well, there was a big discussion about whether it was okay to be naked in front of her before we even started dating. Mm-hmm. So my friends convinced me that this was okay because the best time is naked time with friends is what I was told.
The best time is naked time with friends, yes.
I said, okay.
So what is Jeju for those who don't know?
Jeju is a Korean spa that's up in North Atlanta. So you end up going there and everybody takes off their clothes. And
in the sexually segregated areas.
Yeah, in sexually segregated areas.
And they have hot pools for you to sit in naked. You have to be totally nude. They don't really allow you to sit in with bathing suits or anything like that. Which is mostly where we all like to go because it's nice hot water and it feels good on your skin. Mm-hmm. And then they have outward areas where you wear these, again, sexually segregated outfits, pink for ladies or orange or green for guys.
And my first reaction to it was that my culture doesn't do this. But I don't know how I got convinced to do it anyway. But even still, we still weren't dating. And it took us maybe 2 weeks after that before I decided that I was going to ask her out, and I was sitting with my friends again, different set of friends.
There is contention around this.
Who are also coaching me about, going, how to ask her out. And I was like, well, should I, I don't know if I'm in the friend zone. I don't know what to say, that kind of stuff. And they were actually doing role plays with me, which was hilarious. And anyway, to make a long story short, I finally picked up the phone and I was like, I'm just going to do it my way.
Meanwhile, at Stonecrest Mall, I am watching a movie with my sister, and I'm not into the movie. The movie's kind of whack. We were watching The Last Airbender, and I was like, there's this woman that I'm seeing. I'm really interested in her. And my sister was like, well, just ask her out. I was like, I don't know really how to ask her out. I'm not used to asking people out like this. She said, yes, you are. You usually ask people out. And I was like, you're right. So I'm texting. And while I'm texting, her message comes in. And I was like, oh my God, she just texted me back. She was like, well, then if you're going to go out with her, go out with her. She was really into the movie. And clearly I was interrupting her watching the movie and I wasn't into it. So I just said yes and just, left my note on draft. But she doesn't believe that I was already on my phone at that time.
That's the claim, but I beat you to it.
Wow. I will give you that.
Was this your first interracial relationship?
For me, no.
No, it wasn't.
No, I had a relationship with a white woman before, but other than that, it was mostly black women. But this was my first Asian relationship with an Asian person.
Yeah.
But no, not first.
I've always dated outside of my race just because the South Asian community here is so small. Mm-hmm. And the South Asian queer community is even smaller. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, most of the people that I've met have always been outside of my culture and religion and race.
What are some of the things you all have learned being in an interracial relationship?
I don't know that race really comes into it very often. I think maybe it comes in a very organic way that we don't explicitly talk about all the time. But as they say, like relationships are kind of like a mirror to you. So she notices things that I never would have noticed because I just grew up doing things the way that I do them. And so she asked me questions about stuff that I would have never asked myself or noticed even about myself.
Like what?
Like she was always very curious about my culture, which I really appreciated. And because I don't really get to talk a lot about my culture being in a very minority space, other than with people of my own culture. So in Atlanta, I always found that there were two majorities. There was a white majority and a black majority. And for me, I was always in somebody else's space culturally. And that was okay with me, but but what it did is it did feel a little bit isolated. So other than the South Asian queer community that I had, I wasn't really able to bring my full self anywhere. And Tishana really made me feel like my culture was important for her to learn, and that was really different for me. So she tried to learn the language. She definitely learned some of the cooking. She learned, all of that kind of stuff. And, I don't know if I say this very often, but I really, that meant a lot to me.
Oh, that's so sweet. There's a lot of painful things that have happened in my family, and I would rather keep a distance from them. But Deepali blends right on into my family, and she calls my mom and calls my dad, and they love her. And she loves my kids. My kids are older now, but she met each of them at 16 through very different circumstances. When we first moved in together, I had just graduated from college, and my daughter was still going to Decatur High School, and we needed to stay closer. I was staying with my parents, and it was kind of hard riding MARTA from Stone Mountain to Decatur every day, so I moved in with Deepali. And Deepali and Aaron just kind of like took to her, like a fish to water. It was, I have two moms. This is great. When my son came to live with us, it was because my ex-husband died. And so he was grieving, and it was very difficult for all of us, in particular him. And he kind of gave Deepali the business all the time. He gave both of us the business, but he really gave Deepali the business all the time. Deepali was very patient with him. Read every parenting book she probably could have gotten her hands on. And my daughter was already away at college, so it was just the three of us, and it was just so difficult. But I think that Deepali is a very generous person, and I'm not used to that generosity. So I'm used to being a little more resistant. I push people away, but Deepali's like, no, like how we were talking earlier, like she's like, you're my business, that type of deal. And like really stayed around, which was something I wasn't used to. I had a lot of relationships where people just, kind of stayed where I told them to stay. But Deepali was like, I'm in this. So I think that Deepali's taught me a lot about myself, just seeing who I am in her eyes and her expressing that to me. And I love that about her. Like I never really considered myself important, but Deepali is like, you're important to me, and that's what I get from it. Yeah.
It's very interesting, Tishana, to hear you talk about how Deepali was able to come into the relationship with you and your kids in a very solid way. I know it's very difficult for some people to step into those type of spaces and to be intentional in that way, as Tishana talks about your presence, Deepali. What was it like for you, and how were you able to claim that space in that way?
The way that I see it, I work with what life has to offer me, and it's not ever predictable what it is. So I try to approach it that, oh, well, this is what I've been handed, and so I'm going to do the best with it that I can. And I didn't expect to have 2 children ever, really. And I knew that Tishana had her daughter and her son when I met her, but I didn't know anything about kids. And I had been in relationships with people with kids before, but it was always at a distance. Like the children were always at a distance, so I hadn't ever interacted with kids in a like they live in my home, and they, that I have to interact with them every day and that kind of stuff. So they both are really great kids. If you take what you're given and try to do the best with it, I feel like you learn what you need to learn. One of the things that I did do was read a lot of books, and I tried to have a lot of heart space for him because I knew that he was going through a hard time. Mm-hmm. So I had to remind myself often that I was the adult. And, when he told me things like he didn't like me, I would be like, oh, well, I like you. That was a funny conversation.
You all come from 2 very different spaces, different cultures. Are there things that you wish the other understood about your culture or your upbringing better?
Not really. I think we both tend to talk about it a lot. Like, we do. So if there's something that we're gonna do that involves a different aspect of culture, I definitely tend to explain things, or try to explain everything before we get there, so Tishana knows what to expect and that kind of thing.
Except funerals.
Well, we didn't ever
went to
go to a funeral before.
My grandfather passed away in 2017, and we had to drive from DC to Kansas City to go and bury him. And I don't think that Deepali was prepared for the Black funeral experience. And I mean, it was a tough day anyway. He was my favorite person in the world. But when Deepali explained to her friends about the funeral, because my grandfather's siblings, who I'd never met, were very excited about the sermon. And there was a lot of, Jesus and praise him and yes, Lord and stuff. And Deepali kind of jumped whenever they said it, because she was really shocked. I don't think there's any way to really explain that to people, even though you said you'd seen it in movies and stuff before, but you didn't think that was real.
I thought the movies were exaggerated. So when you watch a movie, you always think, oh, well, there's some truth to that, but that's probably exaggerated. Well, I thought it was exaggerated. So when I saw it in real life, I was like, oh, it really is like that.
Oh, yeah, that was quite the experience. I was grieving, but I was really tickled at Deepali's reaction to what was happening. Meanwhile, all the rest of us are like, well, yes, this is a funeral. We're in the church, But Deepali was just like, I wasn't expecting that. So, yeah.
Well, I do sometimes feel, I do wish sometimes that I had more of a preparation for certain things. Because I think, when you grow up in a really minority culture like mine, you get used to explaining your life to everybody. And I think, here in Atlanta, like both white folks and black folks don't feel like they need to explain anything because they're the majority culture. So everybody's like, I have to go out of my way to figure stuff out before, So I don't think that I've ever expressed that to Tishana. That I mean, I never really thought about it, I guess, because I'm just so used to doing it.
Were there things in Deepali's culture, Tishana, that you were surprised about because you didn't have a primer, so to speak?
Deepali is really good at explaining things beforehand. I think the biggest shock to me in these 8 years has been the Sundust toilets in India, the squat toilets. But she even tried to prepare me for that. Like, she was like, this is how you might have to sit when we went to India in 2017. And just the knowing that there were a lot of people around. I think the biggest thing for me was that I was this very Black American body in a land full of brown people, but still look different enough to be to stand out. And that was just different for me because people stare a lot and I wasn't comfortable with that. There was no real personal space in India. Like, if people were just on you, they were just kind of on you. And I was just kind of like, oh my God, I can't deal with this. Like, it was just too much. There's no real privacy there because there's just people. I mean, everybody interacts with each other in a way that they're always around, and it's just expected that people are always around. Mm-hmm. And I need to retreat every once in a while and just go into my own space. And there was no kind of my own space to go into. And for the 21 days that we were overseas, it was a little difficult, but I still had a really good time. Her family was very welcoming, very kind, very generous. I ate delicious food and I saw a lot of really good things. So it was good to be out of my element a little bit in a nurturing way. Like, I don't feel like somebody just threw me to the wolves and was like, well, you just got to deal with it when you get there. Like, we prepared for months. Deepali was trying to tell me things about India and about her family. So I was prepared and still a little bit shocked, but prepared. I think that's it. Oh, no, because everything else I kind of asked about, like pujas and other rituals and ceremonies. I think I was pretty prepared.
And you had a little bit of exposure to that here because, my mom and my sisters are here. But I think maybe the things that I don't prepare you for are the things that I don't see myself as different.
Mm-hmm. Like what?
It's more, I think the more day-to-day interactions with my family, the ways that I behave at home and the ways that I go about, we talked a little bit about how we do events and things like that and how different that is in terms of like the way that I see what my role is as a host versus hers. Like the way that she sees it is very different. It's things like that, the things that, you think that everybody just must do this the same way. So I don't need to explain anything,
Talk about that difference, because it was a very interesting pre-conversation we had about space and hospitality and some of the cultural differences there.
Well, I'll go first on that one. I'm from a very large family. My dad is also the oldest of 5, and so there's like exponential amounts of people around all the time. So usually when we do have a family gathering, there are large gatherings. But because we're all family, everybody knows where to go and everybody knows what to do. So when we have an event, people bring things. Like, I don't have to worry about going into the different zones of people and being like, oh, I want you to talk more, or I want, people interact. Like, everybody just kind of spreads out. There's like a TV group, there's an outside with dad group, there's people hanging out in the kitchen, and I can kind of just flit about. Even if I was a hostess, I would just think that people would just naturally take care of themselves because I'm just from a large family and that's just how we do. I just feel a lot more relaxed in group settings. I mean, it can be overwhelming, and I can see how it has been overwhelming for Deepali to just meet all of my family at once, all 75,000 of them. And but when I get around my family, it's just like, yes, everybody's here, and I can kind of just sit down. If somebody needs something, they'll say it. Like, there's no need to anticipate things, to me, within family gatherings or even within large gatherings. So that's how I usually carry myself when we have an event. It's like, oh, if somebody needs something, they'll ask. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think for me, because my family is very, very small here in the U.S., I have a large family in India, But we grew up mostly just with the 5 of us. You know, growing up, it was my parents and my 2 sisters, and I'm the middle child. So, to be in a very large family is a very different experience for me. In some ways, I envy it because I'm like, oh, that's so cool that you have like all of these cousins and all of these uncles and everybody gets to interact. And, you know, so for me, it's exciting, you know, to be amongst that and kind of watch the dynamics and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Whereas I think for Tishana, it's like she's so used to it, it can be tiresome for her. And I think on the flip side, I think for my family, because we were the only ones, we're really, really tight. And because, you know, in my culture, there's less of an understanding that you need your private space and you need your, you know, private time and that kind of thing. Because in India, really, you don't, often the way that we saw our relatives, even the spaces were small. My mom's side in particular, the main house, like my grandparents' house, was 2 rooms. So a family of 5 grew up in 2 rooms, and then their children, you know, we were born and raised in those 2 rooms. You know, my mother was with her 2 brothers, and then when we were born, we lived there, you know, with my grandparents. And even like the larger spaces, what you think of as large here is not large. And I mean, it's like enormous in India, right? So if you have a big space, that means you have 3 bedrooms or something like that, you know? So it's a different idea of space, and it's a different idea of social interactions and things. Like your neighbors come by whenever everybody's involved in everybody's life, you know, there's not as much separation as there is here. So I think, you know, growing up in a Indian American culture or an Indian American environment, some things we took from that culture versus and the other things we took from American culture. So because we weren't in India, I didn't have any context. It was like whatever my parents said was Indian was what we accepted as Indian. Mm-hmm. So, you know, so they grew up in the 60s. So even if India has changed a whole lot, my parents' version of India had never changed. You know, so I guess it was just a lot of like, it was like a generational difference as well as a cultural difference. And we grew up navigating that all our lives. So we kind of have created our own version of what Indian American means. Mm-hmm. And I think every first generation immigrant probably does a similar thing, is like what parts do you keep, what parts do you accept that this is how it is in the U.S. But the parts that we kept from Indian culture, I don't necessarily know any different. That, oh, well, other families here don't do it this way, right? So I think for me, because our family was so small and tight, I think that's very hard for Tishana to understand why we're always in each other's business and in each other's stuff. And, you know, true. Like, why is it okay for people to ask these personal questions and, you know, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And with me being from a larger family, if we're in a group setting, like at my parents' house or at another family member's house, we're all sitting and talking in a group, I might want to go join another group, and I'll just get up and walk away. And that's just not something that seems like is okay for Deepali's smaller family. It's like, well, why did she leave? Where are you going? What are you doing? And I'm like, whoa. You know, like, I'm just moving to another space. And I don't think of it as a big deal because it never has been a big deal. Mm-hmm. And if you got like 10 people in a circle, one person leaving isn't that big a deal. But if you only have like 4 people in a circle, one person leaving is a completely different dynamic.
That's fascinating, the whole concept of space and how the dynamics shift. Have your family had a chance to interact with each other? What has that been like?
A couple of times.
Couple times. Deepali's mom and sister came to my graduation from college at my parents' house. And I think they just kind of like sat in the kitchen. Like it was like they were just kind of sitting in the kitchen. And we were just kind of, my family likes to watch TV. Even if it's 4th of July, somebody's always got a movie on or something. And there's a crowd around the TV. There's a crowd, again, out back with Dad on his patio. And then there's like a crowd in the kitchen. And I think Deepali's sister and mom and Deepali were kind of just in the kitchen, but nobody else was really in the kitchen. So I'm sure it was a little awkward.
Yeah, I think for my family, because we're so because of the different approaches to guests, I think her family, you go over to their house and you're just like welcome, and it's very welcoming, but it's also very hands off. Like, you know, you can do what you want. You can watch TV. You can go out the back. You can, you know, interact however much you want, or you don't have to interact at all. And nobody really gets involved to try to see what you want to do. You just do what you want to do.
Yeah, just go do it.
That's not something that my family's used to. So they, you know, when they come into Tishana's parents' house, they were, I guess, had, like, if it had been the other way around, my mother would have made sure that everybody was comfortable. My sisters would have too. And there would have been a little bit different approach and interaction with people. So my sisters didn't know what to do with themselves. They were just like, well, nobody's talking to us. So where should we go? What should we do? You know? So it was definitely different. And then I think my mom...
Your mom cooked for my parents.
Yeah, had invited her parents over for dinner. So that was probably the other time that we all were together. And that was very different because my mom, like, we all sat around the dinner table. We were all interacting with each other in a way that I think her parents weren't used to. So, no, it was definitely awkward both times.
Was it too much interaction for your parents?
Probably. You know, when you have a large family, you kind of just put the food in one spot and step away so everybody can come in and eat, you know, like a buffet type style. But in this situation, like, we were all sitting at a dinner, which is something we just didn't, aside from when we were smaller. Since we've been older, we don't really do anymore. Like, even Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner is just like, I cook this food, it's over here, plates are over there, cups over here, you know, that type of deal. But, and then my parents were having a hard time. Well, my dad because it's, you eat with your hands in some situation with Indian food. So my dad wanted a lot of chapatis, like rotis or like breads to eat. So I just remember him saying, more chapati, please. More chapati, please. Like, he just kept asking for more because he didn't understand how to portion his chapati in a way that he could get through his whole meal. So that was kind of interesting. And then Deepali's mom showed us her singing video, which was really nice. And then they left. Like, it was, and you know, nothing really happened beyond that. But my parents were just like, oh, that was really nice. And then they left. Like, my parents don't really talk much about, they probably talk to each other. They've been in a relationship for 42 years. But other than that, I've not heard anything else about it, like that it was weird or awkward or anything. So I have no context for how they felt about that situation. But
I think that they had a hard time. Our parents had a hard time communicating.
Yeah.
Because I think my mother often didn't understand what they were talking about, and probably vice versa. Mm-hmm. So that was a little bit awkward.
And it was a little awkward at the table. There were like a lot of silences and awkward pauses, but I think it was fine. It was friendly. Yeah, it was it was very nice. Nobody got angry with each other. I thought it was really cute.
I thought so too. I thought it was sweet.
So hearing all of that, it makes me wonder how you all have created a home environment for yourselves that blends your cultures and the way in which you've come to understand space and home.
I would say it's very mixed. In our previous house here in Atlanta, Deepali's mom's art was up. There was Indian art up. We haven't really decided what's going up in our new house yet. It's still something that we're trying to figure out. Like, how do we show my sense of style? How do we show Deepali's sense of style? All that we can really agree on is that we both like IKEA furniture. So there's a lot of IKEA furniture that we've decided on that is similar, but and we put up a couple of things, but you know, everybody's welcome to the house. And in all honesty, I'd rather have things at our house. I don't really have family in Virginia, but usually, you know, now that we live there, we will go to Deepali's mom's house, and Deepali's mom and I have had some difficulty with our interactions. And I just feel safer in my own space as opposed to going into her space. But our house isn't really set up for that just yet. We have a couch we don't like. Like, there's just so many little things. But we're still trying to figure out how we want our house to feel to everybody. And since I don't really have any family or friends to kind of go to up there, it's just, I've been just kind of holed up in the house. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, we haven't really had a lot of events at our house up in Virginia. Here, the space itself was, I had that house for many, many years before Tishana moved in. So most of the stuff was mine. And the way that it was arranged was mine, things like that. So I tried to make as much space as I possibly could with, so that she could bring her stuff in and feel at home. But yeah, I would say 75% of it was still probably my stuff. And because I already had it, there was no reason to replace it, So I don't know how that was for you, but it felt like we made it ours after you moved in, and because the kids were there and stuff. They had a room for them, like Erin had her room, and then Sean had his room, and
which was the same room, just 2 years apart.
Right, exactly. But that used to be my office, so I had moved my office to the back, and and the kids had a room that way.
There are a couple of things when we talk about space in particular that, that were like a little tense. Like I would just have kind of like magazines in a place, and Deepali didn't understand why I kept them there. And it was like, well, I don't really have other space in the house to put things, because the house was full and very well organized, but it was just, it was organized for Deepali's things, and she did make space for me. She did make space for the kids, but it wasn't enough space for what I needed. So then we kind of like did like the Con Marie method, like with the Marie Kondo, the something magic of tidying up, where we did that to try to make more space before we were moving, and trying to be really intentional about how our space looks now in Virginia. That's been something that
we're still figuring out.
We're still figuring out. We've been there almost 2 years, and it's just a process, right? It takes a long time to really kind of make a house a home. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we're working through right now.
But I like what we've done together so far, because we've at least organized the living room in a way that we both are really happy with, and things like that. And it's kind of fun to figure out like what we both like together, and what we, have really different ideas about.
And drawing it out on paper.
Yeah.
And looking for those things.
Yeah. So we're trying to have fun with it.
So you all have spent the past 8.5 years or so making space for one another. What are some things that you all have done that have made it possible for you all to be in that space together, a space of commitment and a living space, and that continues to make your sharing space in each other's lives possible and desirable? What makes your relationship work?
What does make our relationship work?
That's a really good question. I would think that, and it's something that I appreciate, that Deepali gives me my space when I ask for my space. Like I said before, oldest of 5 kids, I've always had to share, and that's an issue with us. I'm learning. It's a growing edge. I don't like to share at all. Nothing. Like candy, spot on the couch, socks. No, I don't want to share anything. And that's been something that I've been learning to do, because Deepali comes from a very generous background and is like, if it's mine, it's ours. And I'm like, if it's mine, it's mine. And I don't want to share because I was forced to share when I was younger, because you're the oldest child and you're supposed to set an example, blah, 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 blah. But I know that when I need to take personal space for myself, I can just like Deepali will step back if I ask her, like, I just need a minute. Deepali will step back. And I like to believe that, I like to hope that I do the same thing for her. Like I'm giving her what she asked for. And it's something that we've had to learn how to do, how to really talk to each other and ask for what we need, with my years of therapy work in recent years. And just her being who she is. I think that it number one, it takes a lot for me to ask for what I need. And number two, it's been great that she's also responded in a way that I feel seen, heard, appreciated when I ask for space or whatever I ask for. I know that she's giving that to me, and I hope I'm doing the same thing for her.
Yeah, I would say that what I really appreciate about Tishana is her generosity of spirit. I think we've been through some really rough times and some very challenging situations. And that, honestly, in my previous relationships would have definitely broke us up, or people wouldn't have had the patience or a capacity to really work through. And I feel like I'm always amazed at how much, even when things get really, really rough, that Tishana is able to come back and I guess see it from a different angle. So even if, in one moment she's really, really frustrated and upset about something, she'll take some time to process it on her own, which it took me a little bit to get used to because, my family, we process everything out loud. But she will retreat and process it by herself. And that's something that I've definitely learned from her. And then she'll come back with a completely different idea of what happened or more capacity or space to deal with it than she had before. And I'm always pleasantly surprised at how she comes back with it. And I think it's that way of coming back that keeps me always hopeful and always confident that we're going to get through whatever it is that we're going to get through, and I think I hope we both do that.
Right. And really just like when we were talking about at breakfast, that relationships are work, and a lot of people want to do kind of the work, but not really call it work. Like I know and I recognize and appreciate that it is work that I keep trying to do. And I can tell Deepali does too. Like when she tries to draw me into a conversation and I'm in the flight or flight type of people, I am definitely flight. And Deepali is like fight. Like we're going to talk about this. And I'm like, we're going to put this off for a while. But she'll keep trying to draw me into the conversation in healthier ways. It's like, I think we need to talk about this. And I'm like, can't we put this off for another day? But we keep showing up for each other. So,
And it's been hard, but I think there's, part two of that is this, that I think that we have given, well, at least let me speak for myself. I feel like Tishana has given me a lot of space to heal, by just being present and giving me, and I don't think I've ever felt seen and heard in the way that I feel with her. And that means so much to me. And I think that healing space, I can say that I'm a totally different person than I was when we first met. And because I have healed from past trauma and I've done therapy before we met for many years. So I haven't done as much while we're together, but I feel like our relationship oftentimes is my therapy because she sees me for who I am and she reflects back to me the things that she sees in ways that I don't see. And then it helps me to think through who I want to be in the world and how I want to be. And hopefully I'm better and better.
You are. I mean, we're both not the same people that we were 8 years ago, to be honest. And I think that is our relationship legacy of sort, like that we're not the same people, but we're still here for each other constantly and without question. And I think that's a great thing.
Relationships are full of challenges and opportunities. And I'm so grateful that you all are here being very vulnerable and candid about your relationship and as you reflect on how you make space for each other. What do you like most about your relationship?
Well, I think what I like about our relationship the most is the way that we love each other without making a thing out of it.
Yes.
We're not announcing it all over the place. We're not, declaring it everywhere. I like that, I guess, just because that's kind of suits my personality.
Mine too.
Because I like having, it feels real and it feels true and it feels solid.
Mm-hmm. I agree. What I like most about our relationship is that we always snuggle at night. I think that like even when it's hard and like one of us might be upset, eventually, you know, even if we have our backs to each other, we're going to be snuggling in the morning or something. And that's really important to me, that I have somebody to, it's not really snuggle, it's sniggle for us, yes. But I have somebody to sniggle with.
What's the difference between snuggle and sniggle?
It's the wiggle. So like you're snuggling, but you're wiggling a little bit. So you get in close and then you wiggle a little bit to settle. And then that's sniggling. Like it's our thing. It's our thing.
Yeah. I like that it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
We're so silly together. We have so much fun. And
make up songs.
Sometimes I tend to get serious. So the fact that Tishana keeps it light and funny most of the time, that really helps me to stay silly.
She says it's me. It's Deepali. I know a lot of people know Deepali in a very serious capacity because she has done a lot of activism work. Deepali is silly. She makes up the best songs in the world and she sings them often. And we're working on a greatest hits album. So there's that. But no, Deepali also keeps it fun. Like you can, when we get into our modes of seriousness, like that's one thing. But when we need to like make it a little lighthearted, like we can get there really fast. There's always a joke. There's always some sort of inside little word that'll get us both giggling. There's always a song that's going to make us crack up because we think of it in a different way. Deepali is always going to sing the words to songs wrong with that, which I think are really cute. It's really cute. She says it's intentional. I think it's really cute. I think it's one of her greatest qualities is that she refuses to sing a song with the actual lyrics. So I think it's really beautiful. But
I feel like our relationship is fun with bouts of seriousness.
Agreed. Fun with bouts of seriousness.
This is the third conversation that I've done with lesbian couples. And so I'm very grateful for all the reflections that our couples have shared. And I know that our listening audience will have a wealth of things to consider as they listen to these interviews. I'm just so glad that you all were willing to be a part of the podcast today. And I want to thank you for being a part of our Black Lesbian Herstory. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Yeah, this was great.
What a wonderful and candid conversation we had with Deepali and Tishana. Regardless of the intersections we bring to our relationships, one thing is sure. We all need spaces that shelter us. Sometimes those spaces are made of wood, metal, and brick, and other times those shelters are made of flesh, blood, and spirit. I hope today that you are in a good space, and I'm so grateful for your being part of our listening audience. Thank you so much, and do me a favor today and share the podcast with someone you know. As always, thanks again, and do something sweet for yourself today as you share space in this world of ours.
Hey, sweet baby.